Hi, mining community. Welcome back to another episode of the Dig Deep the Mining podcast. And today's guest is Owain Morton, who is the business transformation and digital thought leader for Glencore. Owain is a mine engineer by background and has a long history in the industry in various roles, including and within corporate strategy, operational excellence delivery, directorship, and shareholder negotiations. So we're getting Owain on this podcast to talk about various topics, including what Glencore have been doing around digital and transformation. And also he's an active CSM alumni member and wonder how technology is going to assist them, plus many more things we're going to talk about. So I'd like to welcome Owain to the podcast. How you doing, Owain?
I'm good, thanks, Rob. Really nice to be here.
Yeah, appreciate your time as well. I imagine most of our audience know you or have heard of you, but for those that don't know you, wondered if you can give us a brief background of your history from, say, back in the day for graduation and how you got into mining to sort of present day.
Okay, yeah, thanks. So as you mentioned, yeah, a proud CSM alumni member and graduate. In fact, I graduated twice from Camborne, actually, undergrad and postgrad. But yeah, and a past president. So happy to be part of the group that you've had on as past presidents as well. So yeah, graduated out of Camborne and then initially went into civils, into construction work, building a couple of office blocks for Credit Suisse over in Channel Islands. And then I'd sort of had a eureka moment that I thought it was, at least, and went into music and started a band, or joined a band actually, that we got sort of signed up to an agency in London and played some tours and all across the UK for a year or so and recorded an album or two, and kind of got a bit bored of that in the end. It was monotonous, and you got 25 or 30 songs you play 6 days a week, and it's like, wow, okay, this is it. Nah, I wasn't up for that. So
I suppose unless you made it really big, unless you made it Top of Pops #1, and you're this. I
probably could have sacrificed a bit of boredom for that. I'd say, yeah, and certainly some friends and family members actually that are sort of still have been in the music industry a lot longer than I was, and just by my dad's sort of married into a big musical family, but when hearing my mum split up, but yeah, so I know I'd still see what it could have been, but you've got to be super lucky and kind of know people as well as having a bit of talent, and yeah, it was. I probably wasn't cut out for it, to be honest, because you really had to have a singular drive to stay in it and put up with all the other personalities that can happen in music, and I just didn't, and in the end, I was doing other jobs during the day, like spot welding and sandblasting and cutting sheet metal with lasers, just because I didn't want to be locked in a room all day playing music. So I got out of that, and then I took a job full time then as a drill supervisor for a couple of geotech companies in London, and then went to Twickenham for a game, the Heineken Cup final, I think it was, with a friend, and happened to be chatting to somebody in the Guinness tent at halftime, who turned out to be Tony Williams, who's the executive chairman of Dragon Capital Holdings in London, and he's still a contact of mine. And he 2 weeks later, after meeting him, we did a deal, and I went to Mexico and started working for one of the companies he was building there. Building some mines, and it was some exploration and some mine development and ramp up. So that was great, on the tools and the ground, in the shaft, putting in rock bolts by day, and then writing up the report and trying to write the investor relations reports to send back to London so that I could raise money. So yeah, I got a lot of good exposure to how a junior mining world works like that, and so always appreciative of the opportunity that Tony gave me there, and Jim, and worked with some really great guys there. And then I transitioned into consulting after that, with Wardrop Engineering, who then got bought by Tetra Tech and I found myself back in Mexico, actually building up their business development strategy for the Mexican division. And that was going well, but it was kind of the time in Mexico was one of, there was higher security levels, and certainly the influence of the geopolitical system in the US was and Mexico was challenging for mineral extraction licenses and all sorts of stuff. So it didn't really make sense to keep the offices in Tetra Tech, and they started transitioning things back to Pasadena and Tucson. And then I got approached to join the team in Barrick in Saudi Arabia. Well, it was actually Equinox at the time, and then Barrick bought Equinox to build up the Jabal Sayid mine into ramp up and into production there. So I joined as the senior planning manager and alternative tech services superintendent, and and got that mine up and running and delivering from the first stopes, and was involved with some of the infrastructure developments on the surface as well, and managing the infrastructure contractor, and doing a scope one, load one open pit sort of pre-feasibility studies. And then the mine kind of got shut by the Saudi government because a few licenses were not sort of up to scratch. So that took a bit of a hit on the workforce, and then I found that there was an opportunity to join ArcelorMittal into the corporate world. So I started heading up their mine planning management for their underground portfolio, and that transitioned into working with the operational risk management team for the group, the steel group, on the mining portfolio, and leading some of their tailings task force work as well. And then in Glencore, I moved into Glencore from that role on the basis of some conversations I was having actually at the Melbourne Mining Club dinner in Lords. And I just was chatting to somebody at the dinner about some of the things we were trying to do in ArcelorMittal, but we were finding challenging. And then a year later, I got the call to say that they'd had an approval to build a business transformation team in Glencore, and that I'd been selected as somebody that they'd like to build that team with. So I took the opportunity to go and work for Glencore. Moved the family to Switzerland, and started to get involved there. We've subsequently moved back to the UK, obviously still with Glencore, but I mean, part of the reason for that was the cultural side of Switzerland versus the UK, and my wife being Latin American, and we didn't settle as well as we hoped, but the job was still great, and that's why we've stayed with Glencore, even though we've changed positions, locations. So a lucky trajectory, definitely, and certainly it's been a little bit of who I knew rather than what I knew in some ways, but always able to say yes to the opportunities that came my way, which has always been part of my formula, I suppose, of why I've done the things I've done.
Yeah. Obviously, I've spoken to you a few times in the past, and you seem very passionate about mining. Where does your passion come from?
Well, I was born in the Welsh coalfields, in southwest coalfields in Mardy, which is at the top of the Rhondda Fach. My dad was the chaplain of that whole area, or the Anglican sort of priest of that whole parish, and the colliery was at the end of our road, and so we were connected to a sort of mining environment from day dot. But growing up as a child in the 80s in South Wales, early 90s come around, and you sort of you're a bit more aware of things, and going down a pit wasn't really an option. Mardy was the second last colliery to close in 97, other than Tower Colliery, which has stayed open, but that was it. It was a depressed area, and so it really didn't seem like it.
I was going to say, didn't that put you off mining at all during that time?
Oh, because the people were amazing. That
Okay.
Our house burnt down in the mid 80s, just a domestic accident, and the whole town just rallied around us. We lived in the bottom of the post office for a year as a family, and it was just that whole mining sort of camaraderie just came together. And I think that stayed with me and my brother. I mean, we're both in mining, and we both went to Camborne, and so I think that's what's driven it. But it never was a conscious decision until I got to applying for university, and I just applied for, I think, all 6 undergrad courses at Camborne, because I just fell in love with the place when I went down there for a field trip doing my A-levels, and that was it. I was like, I don't want to do anything else. This is everything. I can travel, I can learn a language, I get to solve all of these big problems. You get to work in this and not unknown environment, but it was like mysterious to some, and all of that was appealing to me. So yeah, I think that's where it came from.
Yeah. And with your sort of passion and motivation, has that changed from back then when you got into the industry to now? And if so, what things have changed, and how I suppose, and also how do you keep yourself motivated and interested in this industry?
Well, look, every day is kind of different in mining, and I think that's one thing that keeps you interested. Definitely, whether you're even in the corporate world versus the down in the shaft or on the drives, the challenges that you have keep you motivated, I think, most of the time. The teams and the people that you get to work with can certainly provide you with the motivation to succeed just for them. I think the teamwork and the camaraderie, it's a bit like being in a sports team, I suppose. You feel like you have to deliver for the rest of the team. So that keeps my passion, I'd say, fresh in that space of delivery and execution. But I'd say my passion for the future of mining has changed definitely since becoming a family man and a parent of girls and one boy, but girls first. It definitely has changed my perspective on what the industry should and could be doing, and how what I think I can influence in the industry. That's just, I've definitely changed my perspective there now.
Yeah. Obviously with Glencore, so just wondered if you can tell us more about your role and some of the changes and successes that you've experienced.
Yeah. So as I said, Glencore, the business transformation team was kind of new when I first started back in 2017, and it's a team that was sort of approved through the finance division, but it was set up to try and harmonize the knowledge and the skill sets and experiences that we've got around not just digital transformation, but transformation and general technology adoption, to maximize the value of the portfolio of Glencore, and start to bring the centers of excellence or pockets of excellence that we've got around different change management strategies, different technology adoptions, and bring them into a more unified problem statement and then solution statement as well. So there's been a number of areas where I think we've had a lot of collaboration, vehicle interaction, and certainly what we've done in Glencore, and that's translated into Immerse, the earth moving equipment safety roundtable team, and that collaboration with some of the other majors in that, the work that we've then done with the initiatives for cleaner, safer vehicles with the ICMM, has all spurred from, I think, the collective collaboration inside Glencore that I certainly didn't start, but it was already there. But certainly we've harnessed that as best we can and look to improve on that every day. And then, knowledge sharing and the communities of practice to find the solutions that can meet the problems that we are collectively having, and are now recognizing that mining in hard rock nickel underground, or open pit zinc or open pit copper, until you get to a point of geochemistry where there's some fundamental differences, most of the other challenges are actually relatively similar, and you can articulate a problem statement for a solution provision the same, and that's part of what we're trying to recognize. And it's not something that we're centralizing in any way. The culture of Glencore is very much federated, in the sense that the divisions have their own leadership, their own strategies, their own roadmaps. And we're nimble because of that. I think that is an added bonus compared to some of the other majors. But it does mean there are times when we overlap or potentially double up on resources or problem solving, because we haven't been able to share some of those experiences in the past. So that's the real transformation that we're looking to do. But some technical stuff I've been involved in, which has been quite successful, has been some of the scenario planning and strategic parametric scheduling in the mine planning space, and the ability to do a lot more strategizing rather than clicking buttons to get to the end of the schedule and produce it, get the budget approved, and then go to the next cycle. And refining that process through the adoption of digital technology I would say, has been an ongoing value creation piece of work, which has been developed inside the team that I'm in as well. So yeah.
Okay. And if someone wants to get into the digital and transformation area discipline, what kind of skills do they need? And also, do you say the actual group, that a group of people in that space, do you need people that generate more ideas, or is it people that sort of execute on those ideas? What is there a need for both? Either?
I think it's always a question of balance. Whether you're dieting to keep your healthy body, or whether you're trying to find solutions to significant complex problems. There's a balance of execution versus innovation. And for me, I would say no technology started from nothing. So the innovation piece is part of the drive to keep improving, or keep not changing, but optimizing, enriching the way that we do things. Fundamentally, mining activities haven't really changed. I suppose they've been mechanized, but we still drill and blast, much like we did when we were using dynamite. In some ways, the chemistry, the technology to do that activity has changed and made it more efficient, but the fundamentals are still there, So cutting technologies are obviously coming around the corner, and that's an innovation. But so I wouldn't say we're bereft of ideas in the mining industry at all, but certainly some of the execution is, I would say, is more important at this stage. Some of the skill sets that we need for that, I think, might come from outside the industry, might come from other sectors, and certainly there should be a crossover on many areas. The execution of autonomous flying vehicles, autonomous road vehicles, autonomous process control, even. Not just autonomy, but also, the data analytics and taking value from data is a key component, I think, to where mining is going. Many people have said this, I'm sure, on the calls and in the industry. We're data rich and information poor, and so those skill sets, I'd say, are becoming more and more part of a traditional mining person's skill set, and a lot more of the work that we're doing in Glencore in some of our divisions is to augment the skill sets of a metallurgist or a mining engineer or a geochemist or a geologist with computer scripting skills, Python or C++ or any of those stuff, and getting into that methodology to refine our ability to get information quicker from our data sets, and using bigger data sets, because technology has allowed us to do that, has spurred that on. So, but I think the ideas piece is still valid. It needs to come into our industry and still be generated. So, there's probably every driller in the world has got an idea of how to do things better in the day. And it's more a question of how do they get that to a point where they can pitch it and be understood quickly enough for the sponsor to move forward and support them. And I always used to say when I was in operations, you got to get out of the office and down to the shop floor at least once a week. If you can't do it every shift, get to shift change, get down there once a week and live the whole shift for a week as a mine planner, so that you can make your plans fit what they need underground. If you're not chamfering off a corner for the visibility to be as good as it can be for your loader operator, then why are you trying to be an engineer? Because that's just design. It's not engineering. You're not solving problems. You're creating problems in that space. And so there's got to be a connection to the people that have to live your solution and understand why you're doing that solution, to the idea and where it came from in the first place. So you've got to be a good person. You've got a good people person. So the communication and strategic sort of knowledge is not always hand in hand, but those would be key skill sets to take forward with all of the other foundational technologies, foundational experience, like mining engineering, geology, and so on, which, you know, a few and far between as all these different places close and so on, or stop offering these skill sets. We will be looking at a gap in that space, but we'll fill it with other things. We'll fill it with computer science people.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that that's going to be good for the industry, but that's how it's going to happen at this early stage, I'd say.
Yeah. Around ideas, if there was people out on site and they've got particular ideas that they would like to approach you, do you have some sort of program where they can do that? And I suppose I don't mean like a Dragon's Den scenario, but is there a way that they can pitch some ideas, thoughts? Do you have a sort of process, a system where anyone within the company, if they've got a really good idea and they want to pitch it forward, how can they go about that? Or have you got something already set up?
No, we don't have something set up across the group. The federated model is really the way that works. So within the copper division or nickel division or alloys division and so on, there's technology champions and there's empowered people to run their technology strategy roadmaps and their innovation practices. And we do have a community of practice around, you know, where we hold workshops within our group. And we've got the added advantage of having the commercial aspects of expert process solutions, which is part of our nickel division over in Sudbury. And then we've got Glencore Technology down in Brisbane, which are commercial outfits of innovative technologies and so on. So we can supplement our internal knowledge with that knowledge inside a workshop environment. But day to day, I don't think we've got idea generating sort of systems, but certainly we treasure the engagements that we have with our frontline staff and our supervisors and our management, and they're empowered to bring these things to the right sponsors, either through the workshops and it's a collective sort of thing, and they're quite new, or it will be through the divisional pathways through their strategies that way. So I'd say we're not in the infant stages of that, but as with everything, it could get better. But it's within our divisions already. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Externally, it's not so easy though.
Yeah.
To us, it's harder. For sure.
Nothing is, and always things need to be worked at. So, from your experience working around the world, and obviously you've worked in Central and South America, North and West Africa, Russia, Saudi Arabia, and Australia. What are your key learnings that have stayed with you from working in those different teams, in those different cultures?
So I guess the key takeaways I could say from any one of those cultures has been the stakeholder engagement piece. So although I didn't actually really work in Russia, I worked in the sort of the former Russian states in Ukraine and then, not that it was Russian, but in Bosnia as well after their troubles. And I think in any one of those places, whether it's Mexico, Saudi, Bosnia, Ukraine, Algeria, Liberia, the engagement with your workforce, and not just the workforce, but the people that are attached to their workforce, understanding the motivations as to why they've come to work for you or with you. And something I've always said to myself ever since I started work was that I work for my family. I work with my colleagues, but I always work for my family. And I think if you can go into that, into any culture, like to understand why they do something the way they do it, rather than trying to tell them how to do something the way you think it should be done, you tend to get buy-in, because you've gone out with open ears, you've been able to listen to them. But most of the time, and certainly I stuck out like a sore thumb in Mexico, I can tell you, big Welsh ginger man walking around the Mexican desert. I certainly was, if they didn't call me gringo in the first sentence, by the sixth sentence I was gringo. But they were appreciative to learn once you understood that they had a certain way of doing something and why they were doing it, and give them the opportunity to tell you why, even if you didn't speak their language, so, you could get by. Then that for me was a successful engagement in any parts of those worlds. And the maturity levels for mining and all of those areas were different. They were all at different levels, and so the solutions were different, or the way that I would interact with a solution or an idea was different. But I'd always start the same way. It was always, okay, tell me why you're doing it, and why you're here. Why are you coming to work with us? And often they hadn't been asked that question. Every time I got to Mexico, to a new mine site with a group of guys that were already connected, and we'd just taken over the license, they were like, oh wow, okay, nobody's asked us that before. It's like, well, there's a first time. Just tell us what you want to get from this engagement, because we are here to make friends and influence people, but we want to make sure that we're doing the right thing by them, but also for our shareholders and our stakeholders involved, and their stakeholders are their families. So, if we know that their activities are going to affect their water, for instance, or something like that, they'll know that, and you don't want to try and put them in a position to have to make a decision about doing something because we told them to, knowing it's going to affect their other stakeholders. So, for me, that's where I found most success, I'd say, in those regions. And the same goes for governments. Working with the Algerian government on the business plans for the iron ore mines there, it was a question of, well, why do you still want to be involved in this? What is the long-term plan? What is the 10-year outcome that you want, and how can we facilitate that? Because the rock is in the ground, you can take it out any way you want, but it's got to have a purpose, in a sense. Otherwise, what's the point? So that certainly was equally applicable at that level as a board director as it was, working as a mine manager in Mexico.
Yeah. How does that culture appreciation reflected in the methods of adoption and change management have you seen?
Well, for me personally, I've always looked at it as being able to say, well, most of the time, technologies that I've interacted with in mining don't need to really be proven. What you have to prove is that the people can adopt to that technology and focus on them, not the technology piece. You don't get into the nitty-gritty nuts and bolts of where you're going to store the data. All of that will come. It's, there's either you build a server house or whatever. That they're easy solutions to come across. And people, I found in the past, we get really stuck in those deeper conversations about the nuts and bolts, rather than, well, how is that? Why have we decided to make this change, and what are we going to do about executing, and not the what? It's the why. It's starting with the why. And I do refer to Simon Sinek a lot in some of the conversations I have about change management, but it's appealing to why do you need the change in the first place, not what is the change. And there's an element that I started researching when I first came into business transformation, which was around the neurology of change. And there's this thing called neuroelasticity, where an adult changes the way they learn once they get into adulthood, which is roughly around 25 or 26. And Deloitte did a huge study on this in Africa in 2017, I think 2017 or 18. And that promoted many more ways of being able to present information about change, and allowing different training methodologies, presenting different types of information, all related to the same innovation, same change management, same technology adoption, but with different change management strategies. So you need, when you get into that process, you need to understand that those workforces need to be motivated to learn. So they need to know why they have to learn in the first place. Whereas, a kid or a graduate student is still in the process of just wanting to sponge information and education. They don't have a motivation to learn. They've already got it. And that's all because of the neurological sort of aspects of reaching into that. And so I've personally taken an interest in how that can affect the success of change management processes and the speed of trust. That is the fundamental. The speed of trust correlates to how quickly the change management can be successful, and therefore the return on your investment starts to come through from the execution. And trust is an equation. You have to earn it, and there's a number of elements to that. And if you focus on those elements, then change happens. So you don't have to get into the nitty-gritty. You can, but you don't have to get into all the document controls about all of the different processes that have to change. That does happen. That is an activity that needs to happen, but it's not the reason you do change management. It's the people. And that is the fundamentals of why technology will work or not. The technology will work. It's been proven many times before you buy it. Otherwise, it wouldn't be sold most of the time, unless you're in NASA.
Yeah.
So it's the application of that in your workforce is the key moment of value creation, not the decision by the tech.
Yeah. So it's a people thing, and that's obviously similar to what I'm involved in recruitment. Yeah. It is a people thing, and yeah, I suppose it's like anything, whether in mining, whether you're in another industry, you can have all these things around you that help move processes and systems forward and help you as a company or as an operation move forward. But at the end of the day, it's people and people interaction and people communication. That is always the so simple part of it, but it seems to always be the most difficult part.
Fundamentally, like the biggest resistance to the biggest challenge is the fact that you've got a workforce with free will. Applied intelligence, machine learning is actually relatively easy because the computer hasn't got the intuition to work out whether it wants to learn or not. You're just telling it to learn.
Yeah.
The biggest piece of all of that is stopping somebody having a free will, or not stopping, but enhancing their ability to trust what's coming out of those systems to then change the way they behave. And all that's what you're trying to do, a bit like you're being a parent, is changing your workforce behavior to be either more safe, more optimized, which leads to more safe, often more productive, and ultimately more efficient for your stakeholders and your shareholders. So all the challenges that I've come across, either business transformation or in operation excellence and everything else, is behavioral change and the functions of why behaviors are existing the way they are, not really the technology. I move forward in the safe knowledge that technology is going to do pretty much what it was said to have done, given the right environments. And those environments are the challenges to create. And that's what my philosophy really.
Yeah. Industry collaboration. Given the sort of recent announcement on emissions target setting many of the top mining metals companies, do you see there a collaboration model of organisations like the ICMM and CIM as a useful mechanism for future sustainability within the industry?
I think it's inevitable, to be honest. But when I look at the experiences I had in the steel group and what ArcelorMittal were involved in from a steel group manufacturing sort of industry, there was a recognized sort of collaboration on a number of different not standards, but accepted best practice. And I think we're getting there. I think the ICMM has certainly changed over the last 3 or 4 years in the way that it's counseling the industry, because it is a council at the end of the day, and the way that all of the workflows that they've got going on, the tailings and sustainability workflows, the initiatives for cleaner, safer vehicles, the diversity and inclusion workflows have the collaboration at the core of their model. The affiliate membership strategy that they've allowed to happen now, and all of the mining institutions and mining and metallurgy institutions like CIM, like AusIMM, SAIMM, they all have a part to play, right? They've all had a library of technical documentation and guidance, and not an exclusive membership, but a wealthy, knowledgeable membership that was almost silos just by geography, and the International Council, I think, is blossoming because of it. We've obviously got an industry pressure from, activist funds and financial world, and society at large are a bit more connected, a bit more sort of socially engaged now. But the knowledge base of some of that is still a bit weak in the role that mining plays in a lot of their ability to even go on Facebook and put a message out there about green energy and so on. Is really only driven by the fact that there's copper wire around the world and all of that type of stuff. So I'm not saying that we need to educate everybody before they start spouting stuff, because they're open to their own opinion, but there's definitely a case where collaborating as an industry to on the fundamentals of sustainability and climate change and our role that we play in it, it needs a good structure. And I'm not saying we need to do more, we just need to keep going. I think we've started the ball successfully rolling. And the GMG sort of organization has had a number of global engagements that are in line with some of the stuff that's happening in the wider institutes. And there's plenty of other smaller groups that are working in that space. So yeah, I think it's inevitable, but traditionally, when I first started, there was much more competition in terms of the way that mining companies compared themselves to their peers, with a competitive edge rather than with a collective. I keep saying brotherhood, but that sort of collective mindset as an industry to move forward. And it did first start when the ICMM first started in whenever it was, the late 70s, I think it was. It was collectively there for many other reasons, but I think as different cycles have impacted different parts of the industry, there was a competitive edge that came about, and I think we're coming back into a more collaborative place. So we just need to keep going rather than do more. We're on the right path.
Yeah. So you're an active CSM alumni member, Campbell Score Mines, and your experience obviously in the industry around technology. What do you see the main issues for recruitment of graduates to service the industry for the future?
This is a real passion of mine and a problem as well. I think the traditional skill sets that we refer to as being part of our degree courses of the past are still required. We still have to have an appreciation for, what are the thermodynamics and fluid mechanics of mineral extraction and the geochemistry and the geometallurgy pieces. And there are certainly elements of all of those things that are theory-based that you kind of have to learn. I just think you could probably do that in the industry as an applied process rather than an institutional academic trajectory. And so in order for the mining world, I think, to get the future workforce, I think we need to look at data management skill sets being augmented with on-the-job enrichment of the technical skills that we also need. So mechanical engineering, chemical engineering, all of those sort of related disciplines should be focused and highlighted in the way that the industry talks about the future workforce, and appealing to those people that are those 16, 17, 18-year-olds that are looking at those trajectories, thinking of going into pharmaceuticals or, something that's a little bit more worldly, let's say, or urban or known about. And I think we sometimes look upon our mining industry and we call upon the next generation of people already in the mining industry to be the next workforce. And I don't think that's sustainable either. No. And all we seem to do is talk about our problems with other mining people. Well, we should be talking to the people that are going to come into the mining industry, and how do we identify those?
Yeah. I mean, we were speaking about this the other night, and whether it's mining companies bringing people through their businesses, maybe through an apprenticeship type scheme, whether the government does get involved as well, and like, especially like here in the UK, there used to be a lot of trade sort of apprenticeships. I know, say from when I was that sort of age, me personally didn't. I actually went to university, but a lot of my friends went and done trades and done an apprenticeship where they would work in industry for 3-4 days a week and a day doing academia. So there's no alternative for mining companies or the mining industry for that kind of scenario. It's if you're going to be technical, you have to go to university, learn it, and then go into industry as such.
I think that was and it wasn't the traditional way in some ways. Certainly in Camborne School of Mines versus, say, University of Leeds or RSM or some of the other institutes, we were really lucky that we had a test mine and we had an active mine in South Crofty, literally on our doorstep. And so most of us, sorry about that, Rob.
That's right.
Most of us were, not that I was lucky enough to do that, but most of us were able to get into that world alongside our academia. So we could go to the test mine, we could go to the, well, not in my day, actually, we only had the test mine. You couldn't go to South Crofty, but, that was possible. Other institutes didn't have that capability. In Australia, I think they did have that, and some of the areas in Canada and so on, South Africa too. So conventionally, that was kind of in existence, but it's I don't know what happened, but certainly in my generation for the last almost 20 years, there's been this penchant, let's say, for having degree qualified people coming in on a technical basis. Well, there's elements of what they've achieved at degree level, but actually they could probably get more value from their employees with people on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, do you, obviously being in the area that you're involved in, do you think mining companies should, instead of taking people from the universities, should be going to the schools? So when they leave at 16 and 18, before they go to university, get them from there and say, look, come and join us, come and join our organization. We'll show you around all the different departments, and you've got certain skills. We'll show you everything. We've got certain skills, and we'll develop you over a period of a few years. And at the end, you're going to have a certain skill set, and you will then either be a geologist, mine engineer, maintenance, head office, whatever way. But it's getting them from the schools as opposed to getting them from the universities.
For sure.
Is mining companies thinking that way? Are they doing anything like that way? Are they opposed to it? What would you say your thoughts are around it?
Look, I can't speak for Glencore overall, because as I mentioned, the federated model is different. So the different interactions of the geographies of where we operate, we have different relationships. We've got relationships in Queensland that are different to our relationship with McGill or Montreal. and we have a schools outreach program in certain parts of the world as well. So yeah, Glencore has a multi-faceted strategy depending on the geographies we're in that space, and that's probably true of a lot of the big miners. But my personal opinion would be that yeah, you need to have a structured global, or not global, but certainly a local strategy for school outreach and incorporation into your stakeholder map, the local schools, even the national schools in the regions or the countries you're working in. As long as your mining portfolio has got, 10 to 15-year life in any one of your assets, you should be speaking to 14-year-olds, because when they're 24, they're either coming in to help you close or to expand or to move that asset into a new, ore body or field. So, and they're local, 90% of people that I know who aren't in mining haven't moved more than about 300 miles away from where they were born to work. And I don't see why that would be any different in the vast workforce of the mining world. So the strategies for that needs to be far-reaching, and we need to have a longer horizon than we currently do on the way that we strategize for our business's future.
Yeah,
we spend a lot of time looking at 5-year plans and less, but it doesn't include our workforce most of the time.
Yeah, in the perfect world, what would you like to see the industry doing? Or I take it the industry will lead it. Obviously, government can get involved. How would you like like I said, in a perfect world, how would you get more people into the industry, no matter what subjects they're studying? Yeah. In a perfect world, how would you envisage that if everything was possible?
I would like centers of excellence to be industry sponsored, with certain themes attached to those centers of excellence. You might have a sustainability and climate change technology center of excellence versus a metallurgy and geodata science center of excellence. And they could be global, but connected through the mining companies that are already globally connected through the International Council, or just because they are multinational companies. So industry driven, connected with the right themes that are open to school groups being shown all of the different sort of elements of working in a mining site or a mining application, but also the ability to envisage how. So one of the things that is a bit out there and a bit left field, but something that I came across early on when I became a dad, was the digital literacy of children these days is part of where they're getting their world knowledge from. And one of the biggest selling games in the world at the moment is Minecraft.
My kids play that.
Yeah. Well, I went to a school for my nieces to give a talk about the rocks, the rocks around us. And within about 10 minutes of talking about, everybody's did their teeth this morning, has interacted with rocks, everybody's got a zip on their jacket. Well, they all came from rocks. And they all said, oh, that's how Minecraft works. And in Minecraft, they have these little pixels in the hills of the open platform that tells you what's in there, iron and coal and whatever, your copper and stuff. But they don't have the link to say, well, how does that become suddenly a sword or something to build with inside that digital scape? But they're connected. They're connected to the natural world just through that. And they see things around them. And Lego is a great example of, how you can be interacting with models of equipment and other things. So, why aren't mining companies or International Council trying to sponsor the Lego company to make, all of those types of different things?
I was just about to say Minecraft. Why don't some of the big mining companies advertise Minecraft? And then people may get that connection.
And parents will get it then, as well as the children. And that half the battle is getting the parents to keep talking about it at home, so that they stay connected, they stay engaged, and then they think about that when they come to make applications for uni, or when they're going to decide what subjects they want to do at advanced level, whatever it is, high school diploma, whatever they are in the world. So there's an element of strategy on the kids, but also on keeping the parents understanding why mining is important and what it does for their day and what it does for the kids' day. Because every child now, like my 2, he's not even 2, and he knows, he can say the word phone, but he can't say the word papi yet. And he can open my iPhone and move the icons around. So every single one of those kids now that are 14, 16, 18 are more engaged in a digital space with data than I ever was. And they know they want real-time activity. They want real-time information. And that is what the mining companies are starting to want. They want real decision makers to act, to stop something happening before it happens inside a shift.
Yeah, well, but I don't think those children, those teenagers, would necessarily think that kind of technology is prevalent in mining. They wouldn't probably make the connection. Well, they would just think it's you go out to a mine, you get dirty, big black coal faces, and that's it. That's probably their impression. So again, it's a branding image around the whole industry.
And it is a bit of an education in the sense of them saying, well, how much gold is in an iPhone? How much silver is in an iPhone? How much copper is in an iPhone? How much copper is in an Xbox? All of that sort of stuff we don't talk about. We talk about how much copper is in an electric vehicle and all of that. Well, most of the kids that you want into the workforce don't care about an electric vehicle yet. Some of their parents probably do, but if they're already looking at electric vehicle, they already have some sort of cognitive sentiment to make a change for whatever reason, climate change or efficient or economics, although some of that I think is flawed anyway if you're going down an economic route for an electric vehicle. But anyway, it's my personal opinion.
Yeah.
But so you're already trying to pitch something to a conversion to somebody who's converted, whereas the workforce of the future is 15, 16 years old right now. They couldn't give two hoots about an electric vehicle, in my view, most of them.
Yeah.
But they do know what it takes to have an Xbox and how much that costs and how the disc works inside it if they're still playing with C discs. I don't even know. I mean, I'm not that connected. I know a lot of games are now on the cloud. So, but how does the cloud work? And why aren't we telling them? Well, the only reason you can play Amazon Stadia, whatever it's called, is because of a global network of interfacing that is basically coming from motherboards and copper and all this other stuff. That if you can't recycle it, which we haven't got enough to recycle anyway, you have to mine it.
Yeah.
So those are the stories I feel we don't tell enough of as an industry, and the school outreach programs worldwide could probably do that. Not necessarily influencing their curriculums. We don't want to get that deep into it, I don't think, but we could do strategic days and strategic training days for the teachers as much as for the kids through the centers of excellence that we could build as an industry in the different topics. And if we got enough of the major mining companies to commit, a certain amount of funding over 5 years for these centers of excellence to pop up. And don't get me wrong, there are some happening. There's one in Wasim, I saw another one in Vancouver, and another one in Canada. There's a few in Pretoria connected to the university there. So the trajectory is starting to bring this to the fore. But it's, for me, the storyline is much more around understanding what the day-to-day workforce of the future is doing now and bringing mining into that day-to-day application. So digital literacy, gaming, the clothes they wear, or the metal fastenings on the clothes, or however we are connected to fashion and style and music, all of those things could be talked about in a mining context, but we haven't put enough effort into it.
Yeah. So I'm going to wrap this up. I've got one more question. Working obviously in the digital and transformation area, how do you see the future of that within mining? Or what is the future outlook?
Well, autonomy is around the corner, but it's been around the corner for a little while. But I think, emissions, is a hot topic. Managing our energy usage is part of that. And the decisions that we make as human actors in an operating space sometimes means that we use or overutilize some of the energies that we've got available to us, certainly for power and other things. So optimizing our energy use through computer-aided decision making is basically inevitable. We're at the forefront of it, but I think there'll be a much bigger emphasis going forward into the next 10 to 15 years at some of the achievements to get to our scope 1, 2, and 3 targets. From a Glencore perspective, I mean, we just came out with that just in December, and you know, a big chunk of that is related to our coal assets strategy. But there is there's some fundamentals on our scope 1 and 2 emissions management, which will relate to optimizing our process controls and the application of semi-autonomous or computer-aided decision making for either usage of latent capacities, of which we know we still have. We've been a bit complacent as an industry around what we've over-engineered some of our need for energy and stuff, and so we misplace some of where we put that. You know, we might have huge gen sets available for redundancy for the mill drives or filter pressing or pumping or whatever. But I think if we could have the smarts to redeploy some of that energy, then overall we'd start to get a reduction in our scope 2 or scope 1 emissions. So I think computer-aided decision making and autonomy in that, or autonomous process control in that space, is the world is turning in that way already. But I think there'll be an uptick in that, and getting your skill sets aligned to those topics as a graduate or a university prospective person now, it would be, I think, a good foundation for any CV that you're going to be looking at as a graduate. I think the world in mining in the underground space is still deeper. You know, there's a new call for nickel and a new call for copper, a new call for cobalt, manganese. Lots of those battery mineral or battery metals require a different method of extraction, certainly a depth. Safe deep development is an initiative in the Canadian Mining Innovation Council at the moment that Glencore are involved in, which is looking at some alternative ways to mine at depth, which involves robotics, involves autonomous, it involves changing the mining cycle perhaps in some ways, you know, removing the batch process, trying to get continuous. If you look at what coal did over the last sort of 15, 20, almost, well, if you go back that far, 30 years, to get to a continuous process of mining, the cutting piece was one of the pieces, but the main uptick that certainly the guys in our coal division saw was the ability to keep moving rock continuously, so continuous haulage systems, and the ability to support that, which often means some sort of cutting wheel or some sort of cutting process, so that you don't have to do the drill and the blast and the support and the meshing and that sort of batch cycle. So I think that will come around the corner. It could be 15, 20 years out before that's an established activity, and it won't get rid of all drill and blast for sure. You still need all your nooks and all your intersections and your right-hand drives and other stuff for the mine infrastructure in an underground space to kind of happen. And you can't really do that with cutting. But I think that's a place where there'll be a significant step change in some of the way that we operate our mines or develop our mines. But operating, I think, will be real-time decision making for productivity gains and safety as a result of that. And yeah, I mean, in geometallurgy and the geochemistry and metallurgical space, I think the use of data to help optimize their process control is is part of the fundamental technology roadmaps that we've got certainly in some of our divisions in Glencore. Was a heavy topic that we talked about in the last workshop for our best practices as well. So I'd say those are the not burning platforms, but certainly the trends and trajectory and topics and themes. And then all of that relates back to sustainability, that all of those things will influence our footprint of tailings, our footprint of carbon, our footprint of water. They'll all have a direct resulting impact, a positive impact, from being more efficient and being more real-time proactive. And that's, to me, the sort of bit that is missing in some of the rhetoric around the industry of, well, we've got to focus on tailings management, we've got to focus on, emissions management, or safety. And don't get me wrong, they're all got extreme value to a business, but some of the main sort of value statements have got to be around the more productive, the more efficient you are in the decisions that you make. The resulting factor will be you're more efficient with your energy, you're more efficient or producing less waste, and you're putting less people in danger by being efficient and complying to the reasons why you are there. The reasons you're in a mine, the process that you have to follow there is set out. If you cut the corner because of something, understand why, not chastise them for doing it, but understand why they chose to do that and change that. The failure mode analysis is key to most of that. And that will remain. The failure modes will drive what technologies we need, it'll drive what efficiencies we chase, and it'll drive the future trends. Whether we need continuous mining or not will be down to how many failures or how many lost time events do we have in a batch process.
Yeah. Owain, it's great talking to you. Certainly provided a lot of content around the digital and transformation space. How can our listeners get in contact with you if they've got any questions or want to follow some of the work that you're going to be doing in the future?
Well, I'm pretty sure most of my link contact information is up to date. So feel free to reach out through my LinkedIn page. That's probably the best place, actually. My work with Glencore will be governed by the publicity of what we are doing through the corporate channels. So I can't control any of that, I'm afraid. Yeah. But certainly there's more and more stuff coming out from the Glencore channel in terms of the statements that we make on our LinkedIn and Twitter and other things. I'm not on Twitter. Yeah. But so mostly through LinkedIn.
Yeah. Okay. No worries. Hope the audience have enjoyed listening to this. I certainly have. And please share this episode amongst your friends and family, etc. I think people outside of the mining industry may be interested in this particular episode as well, because it's not just necessarily mining focused as to the technical around mining. It's people may understand what mining is by perhaps just listening to this episode. So I appreciate if you can just share it amongst your friends, family, anyone that may be that may want to hear a different view around mining. That'd be appreciated. So until next time, happy mining.